I would always advocate for master studies because I've seen it yield dividends in terms of art growth personally. Whether you are an artist or a creative in any other industry, one consistent thing is that everybody has taste, everybody has standards of what they expect to see in that industry or in terms of art. If you see someone who's being called a top artist, you expect their art to be a certain way. And if you're someone who's aspiring towards greatness, you expect your art to be a certain way or to look a certain manner. One thing I've noticed is that if you are terrible, what you could do is that you could pick your favorite artist work. I always say this and I'll keep saying it. It's a message I'll keep preaching on up until 2050. You pick their work and settle down and draw it. Now, the way I approach my own master studies is quite different because I have a character I'm working on, several characters I'm working on. So when and those characters I'm going to be drawing them a lot. So I try to get as familiar and as efficient as possible in terms of how I approach studying. So I would pick an artist or a group of artists that I like or I consider in similar category to how I want my art to be represented, and um I would try to study their work. So this is my inking, like how before I started doing master studies, like I had decent understanding of figure drawing. I had decent understanding of things like line weights and hierarchy whenever you are looking at art. I had, it was a decent looking inking, but I wasn't satisfied. And a lot of the times I was doing these inks in this way because I was the one that was going to color it eventually. Because I'm always scared to add too much blacks to my work because I want the colors to just be allowed to breathe, or like the colorists to be allowed to do their own thing. So I always like adding just as minimal hatching lines or as minimal blacks as possible, and I just prefer to add those value ranges in when I'm working like with the colors. When I started doing master studies, I became a lot bolder with my figure drawing when I saw how different artists approached doing value ranges with things like hatching lines and stuff like that. I became a lot bolder with adding textures, and especially since I finally decided to just be, because I noticed that a lot of these artists that I like that do figure drawing, these comic book artists, they do know how to color, but they don't color a lot. They just focus on the black and white, and I feel that like frees up a lot of headspace for them to just focus on making the illustration as best as possible, the inking look the best way that it could possibly look. And I just decided to adopt that type of mentality whenever I'm approaching my own inks, whenever I'm approaching my own figure drawing, and it has elevated my own art to the next level. And it's the same thing that happened in terms of like my painting. When I finally started doing painting studies, trying to figure out my art style, what I was comfortable with in terms of painting, and I'm going to show you guys that one very soon. So yeah, master studies, do them as much as possible.